I'm Terrence James, and you're watching another episode of Neutral Reviews, where we do real reviews for real decisions. And today we're looking at my 2020 Subaru BRZ, actually my very dirty Sport-tech RS. And the reason why we're looking at this today is because it's become relevant again. And it's become relevant again because of the supply chain issues. And it's awfully hard to get your hands on a 2022. So what we want to do today is review this car and put it against its original marketing like always, but I'm also going to put it against the 2022 to see how it stacks up against it. And because I've owned this car now for a year and a half, I'm also going to tell you some of the things that I've learned to give you a better idea if you should buy this 2020 now or never consider and wait for the 2022. Let's take a look. We better start with the 205 horsepower, 156 pound-feet of torque, direct injection, 2-liter, flat 4 boxer, naturally aspirated, high revving elephant in the room, or in the engine bay, which they have conveniently painted red to make look more fast. But sometimes we put makeup on a pimple to cover it up. Now, to be fair, the F820 was a purpose-built engine by Subaru, built to be lightweight and durable, and capable of flying down windy, narrow Japanese roads in a way that would leave all others behind. Except those in North America obsessed with power, so what about them? Now, Crawford Performance, famous for tuning Subaru, says this engine can handle a lot more power, in fact double. They actually go on to say that the EJ engine found in the STI with the same turbo cannot produce as much power as this or handle the same punishment. So why not just put a factory turbo on it? They know that that excuse was not going to fly in North America, so what is the real reason? It has to be the Toyota Supra 4-cylinder, the 2.0 GR, because if this engine was turbocharged, even though it would be a little bit more expensive, it's still a good looking car and probably would handle better, and that would for sure erode and eat into those precious Supra sales that they need so bad to rebrand with. And as we said, it would erode their own customer base, you and me, who this car was originally designed for. So I appreciate the strategy to make that happen. They've taken a lot of NVH materials out and metal, but by doing that, what they did was able to keep that price so you and I can buy it and leave a little money left over in our pockets so we can tune it the way that we want. Now, I do admit, after driving this for a year and a half, that it does drive me bonkers at times, not having that low-end torque, especially during the traffic light Grand Prix, which is pretty embarrassing. However, this engine makes me super happy when I take it out for spirited driving or on track, because this engine performs so well in the high end. Once you get it going down those windy, narrow roads and you have that power band up there, you have power all day long and you never even consider that there's a problem with it. So let's continue on with our review. Now, when we talk about Subaru BRZ handling, we have to talk about how well this car turns in and rotates and holds the road under load. But what we often forget to mention is the reason why, or one of the reasons why, and it's this little boxer elephant in the engine bay. And that's because this engine, being a boxer engine, is a flat 4, they call it. And that engine, like a Porsche in the back, can be placed very low in the chassis. This one just happens to be in the front. So this is a mid-engine car, a front mid-engine car, yes. But one of the reasons why it handles so incredibly well. But one of the other reasons, of course, are rims and tires and brakes. Now, this car has Brembo brakes on front and back. Now, just to show you how big of a deal that is, even at this price point, the Honda Civic Type R and the Toyota Supra, and we'll mention these cars a few times and not to pick on them because they're awesome cars, but they don't even have that. Now, the rims, as we said, are 17-inch, like on the base, but these are half an inch wider and the rims are lighter weight, again to help with that rotating mass to increase handling and braking and all of that. Now, one of the things unfortunately that separates this car from its bigger brother, the TS, is they did not put on the stickier Michelin Pilot 4 tires, the performance tires. They kept on the normal base summer tires, which can be a little bit more fun. However, this comes to my lesson learned for you. Be careful. And when I say be careful, I'm not by any means encouraging dangerous driving, but that's not my warning. My warning is that once in a while, it's very unpredictable and this car just decides to kick out and go around. But otherwise, it is the most predictable, balanced car you're ever going to drive. So just heed that small warning. So let's continue on, because one of the things that make a car handle so well is its chassis. So let's talk about this chassis. Now, we've already mentioned that this car already has the perfect recipe to make it a great handling car. It's front mid-engine, it's rear-wheel drive, plus it's coupled with decent tires, amazing brakes, and Sachs performance dampers. But those things are absolutely nothing if they're not bolted onto a strong, lightweight, balanced chassis. And that's exactly what we have here on Subaru BRZ. In fact, this is a bespoke chassis that was built for this car. They did not decide to use the global architecture. And not only that, but it did such a good job that they've used it again in the 2022. Now, it doesn't matter how good a chassis performs if the body it's on is not attractive. So let's talk styling. Now, opinions may be split on whether or not this generation of BRZ is attractive, but one thing most can agree on is that the look of this car is unmistakable. Whereas the new 2022, although probably a better looking car, its looks are mistakable because you could mistake it, let's say, for an NSX or a Supra or even the new Z car coming out. Now, I actually had an opportunity to buy a new 2022 when it first came out. Not an opportunity to review it because I didn't have enough time with the car. But one thing that I was shocked about was when I took the car around, no one looked at it. I usually get a few people that will look at me in this car. Usually some young kids give me the thumbs up, or some older dentist-looking guys look at me and give me the thumbs up, and the occasional lady. But most of the time, I do get some looks with this car, but I didn't get any with the 2022, which was strange because I didn't even know the car was available in Canada yet. I was driving by and was shocked when I saw one come off a truck, and I went immediately and tried to buy it. And I actually turned it down. As I said, although I liked the look of the car, because it didn't have an RS type package on it without the Brembos and the Sachs dampers and things like that, it just didn't handle nearly as well as this car. And it didn't make me feel as special because I get a lot of compliments on a lot of these design features that this car has. And when we talk about design features, one thing that I appreciate with this is that they stuck with the original design philosophy to highlight the engineering philosophy, which was to give you that low, wide, flat look, which this car has, and it's unmistakable. And another thing that's unmistakable that separates this car from the competition, its direct competition to Mazda Miata, is practicality. So let's go into the interior and talk about all the practical features this car has that it doesn't. Now, when we talk practicality about the BRZ, we also have to talk about impracticality, and that's these back seats. And it's unfortunate because they should be extremely practical. Because although I'm only 5'7", it is quite easy to get in and out back here. And as you can see, when I put back the seat, now granted the seat is about in the middle position, but still, even so, you can see that there's quite a bit of leg room back here. The seat could go quite a bit further back. And I do have a little bit of headroom, and again, I'm only 5'7", so I don't think anyone's fooling themselves. This car is not really built for adults, but it could be for adults in a pinch if you could stick your feet under the front seats like most cars. Now, the reason that you can't on this car is because it's a sports car. And part of being a sports car, a true sports car, is driving position, which we'll talk about in a second when we finish the interior review. To get that great center of gravity and that low driving position, they have to put this seat as far down as they can, so it's pretty much on the rails. So, like a lot of cars, including these ones where they carve out the back for your knees, there is no room for your toes here. But I believe that they knew that most people wouldn't be using this back here. For that reason, they'd be using it for cargo. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of room back here for cargo when these seats are folded down. I have every year, well, it's being 2 winters now for 1.5 years for when I've got the car, I've put the snow tires in the back, and they do fit just like the marketing says, including some tools and, hey, even some lunch. But here's another lesson learned. although it's not overly comfortable for adults back here because of the toe situation, who it is comfortable for is a car seat, a child in a car seat, or a small young adult or a small child. When growing up, my father had one of those S10 Chevy pickup trucks where you sat sideways in the back, and probably not safe nowadays, but this is a Maybach back here compared to that when it comes to space. So let's move to the front. And when we talk about the BRZ, one of the things this car is famous for, which most people will not disagree with, is its driving position and how everything is driver-centric. It is truly a sports car in that regard. You have this small diameter steering wheel. As we mentioned, it's great communication that comes back from it. Even the controls here are quite simple for everything that you need. You've got your music and things like that on that side, and controlling this screen on the middle here. And when we talk about screens as well, one thing that I'm glad in a world of digital screens, which I do like, don't get me wrong, and that 2022 has adopted that same type of interior design with the new electronic screen. But one thing that I really appreciate with this car, and when we were talking about Japanese early 2000s and 90s sports cars, is these analog gauges. I love them. I absolutely love them. Not only do I like them because they're analog and they just look good and they work well, but that center mounted tach, just like a Porsche. Again, that sports car feature. When we look at the infotainment, nothing special, but it's also nothing bad. Subaru has a very simple but intuitive and responsive infotainment. Here in Canada, they do give you Sirius Satellite Radio for a few months, I believe, when you buy the car for free. It's got your Starlink in it, which works well. There's also that part of that is a paid service, I'm assuming, as well. I do not have that. And of course, you have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Now, one of the lessons learned over the course of ownership here, it's a plug-in. Now, I like that. However, it still doesn't work once in a while. I have no idea why. But the lesson is, because this cord is here and this is a manual shifter, sometimes it can get a little irritating if your fingers hit it and things like that. But that's just me. And when we talk about this shifter, it's a short throw, close ratio, 6-speed manual transmission, and it's one of the best in the market for any amount of money, including Porsches and things like that. It's a very notchy, mechanical feel. It's easy to get into the gates. There's no looseness to it or sponginess. Everything just feels really expensive and good, and you need a clutch. Now, the clutch on this car, again, lesson learned. I've stalled it a million times, including just the other day. It's a very finicky clutch. It's not the most finicky, but it's a little finicky. And you just have to, it comes out and then you feel a bit of a grab, and then and then there's nothing again. So you just have to understand that. But I like the weight of the clutch. I had a Ford Focus RS for a little bit. That car, amazing clutch on that, but it gave you a workout. It was pretty heavy. This is nice. It's not too light, but it does feel a little bit more special. And we look at the pedal box as well. Again, it's very easy for heel towing. Again, I've had a Dodge Viper in our family before, and you've got that big drive shaft tunnel which offsets the pedals, and it feels really strange. I could never get used to it. This here, again, because everything is perfectly focused and aligned to make sure that you have the best possible driving experience, period. And when we talked about that front mid-engine, these seats being mounted low, you are nice and low when you're at that center of gravity. It's such a strange but good feeling. And again, I keep talking about that GTI I have because it's a wonderful car. It's the hot hatch of hot hatches, they say. But I still feel like I'm up on a perch with those seats. I'm almost driving a minivan after I get out of this car is how I feel, and no one else would complain about that. It's just, this is how amazing the driver position in this car actually is. Not much else to talk about other than other practical features that some cars don't have, or they're, not the best, like that Miata, no offense to it. But you have cup holders on both doors. You fit many different shapes and sizes in there. You have two in the middle console that you can actually pull out if you don't want to use them or if you want to clean them. There's a little space here. The glove compartment has a decent amount of space. Like I said, for a small car, this is almost like a GT in the sense of you could take it on a long trip and be just as comfortable in almost any vehicle, yet you can take it to the track and pound on it all day long, and it should survive. And as many say, like Savage Geese and others, with, you know, proper brakes and suspension and tires on this car, it's a track monster. It really is. It's a momentum car, and if you learn how to keep those RPMs nice and high, really you're not going to suffer any when it comes to that. So let's carry on. Now, when we move on to the driving portion of this review, one of the things that I like to do in our reviews is to give you my first impressions. Well, my first impressions were a year and a half ago, but because this car made such a strong first impression, I can still remember it like it was yesterday. And the reason why it made such an impression was because I just always assumed that this car was a cheap imposter to the sports car scene and was really just a fast and furious boy racer car that was really nothing to it. And I was actually in the market for a new Golf R or a Honda Civic Type R, and I decided to drive this car, and I was just blown away. I was blown away at how well it handled, but part of the handling is how exotic it feels, because it feels so tight and so, I don't know the right words to say, if stiff or tight, or they're not driving it properly. It's got a heavy feel to it, but not in a sense of the car is heavy, because it's only 2,700 pounds, and known for how lightweight and agile it is. It just feels very, very solid and well put together, like it is something more exotic than it is. Now, aside from first impressions, we got to talk about lasting impressions, which is the acceleration issue. But I don't even know if it is a real issue. And what I mean by that is, yes, as I mentioned earlier in the video, there's a definite lack of low-end power in that mid-range where you do your day-to-day driving, where you want that zip, you know, to get through an intersection or to pass somebody or whatnot. But really, the numbers are not as bad as you would think. The 0 to 60 on this particular car, the 2020, I mean, when I say that, is 6.2 seconds, which, you know, is not the best, but it's not the worst. So why is it described as a dog? Especially when a GTI, for instance, my GTI, my Mark 7, is approximately around the same 0 to 60, yet that car is described by reviewers as a canyon carver, and you wouldn't want anything else faster for a public road. So why is this car considered a dog then? Why is it considered so slow? Well, I believe that it's because the GTI is not also competition with other higher-end rear-wheel drive cars. And yes, this is a $35,000 car, give or take, Canadian, when it was new. However, because of the look and because of the way it handles and because of the fact that there's not a lot of true sports cars out there, your rear-wheel drive, manual transmission, naturally aspirated cars, lightweight, all that stuff, then you're starting to look into Cayman territory, because really this is the kind of car, like a base Cayman is where you're going to have to go if you want something to handle this well or better. Now, one of the things that we always talk about here in North America, of course, is 0 to 60 or quarter mile times, things like that. But what we never really talk about is, what do we do the other half of the time? Well, we're stopping pretty much the other half of the time. And this vehicle here with the Brembo brakes stops amazingly. And as we mentioned, it has Brembos front and back. Are they really necessary on a lightweight car, rear-wheel drive like this? Probably not really. However, it's nice to have, because, as I said, I get a lot of compliments. But when you're actually stopping, as I am here, even on something so simple and routine, just the smoothness of it, the progression of the pedal, the pressure that you have to put on the pedal, it's a good pressure. It's not too much, but it's not light. It's not like every other car, including the 2022, where it does feel a little spongy, which is disappointing. Now, the 2022 stops in a good distance and everything else like that. I'm not saying that it felt unsafe or anything, but it didn't feel like these Brembos. Now, I'm not a big track person, but again, if you're doing your research and you're looking at the reviews, again, brakes like this are pretty much the exact same 4-piston front, 2-piston rear calipers that you're going to find on an STI that's almost 700 pounds heavier. So you just need to do the math and know that if that car stops amazing, just think of how well this car stops. Now, stopping is only one thing to consider. What about comfort? And what about suspension? So let's talk about that. Now, before we talk about the Sachs dampers and these seats, I'm just going to give you a quick 0 to 60 run here. one thing for a lesson learned to bring up, that this car has a track mode, I guess you would call it, a track mode, even though it's not really like a track mode in a lot of cars where it's got the dynamic chassis and adjusts throttle response and it tightens up the steering and whatnot. What it basically does is it allows the car to go around sideways and do a little drifting, because the normal stability that it has on it works really well. And what I would another life lesson is I would suggest using it when the roads are really, really wet or really snowing, because this car is a drift machine. It's very controllable, it's very balanced and whatnot, as we mentioned, but it is a drift machine, so it is nice to have that extra layer of security. But the lesson that I wanted to bring to the forefront here is when you put it in track mode, it allows the car to go around as far sideways as you could possibly get without wiping out, if you know what I mean, which is amazing and great. So it gives you a lot of fun and a lot of play, but also gives you that security. However, one thing I don't really understand from a practical perspective, I understand from a technical perspective, is it doesn't allow the wheels to spin. It keeps the actual traction control on, which is very frustrating because of the fact that it is so fun to chirp those tires. Because whether or not Subaru says you should or not, I have no idea, but you can do a flat foot shift in this, and it will chirp the tires, including the summer ones. It has that much power. So again, it's a bit of an anomaly in this car. Once you get those revs in the high end, you have more power than you could ever need. But for whatever reason, the way that they have that calibrated, if it's on track mode, it won't allow you to spin. And again, from a technical perspective, if you're on track, you don't want your wheels spinning, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, you want to have some fun here too. So how you can get around that is, which is programmed to the car, it's not cheating or anything. If you hold the off button for traction off for a second or two, you'll see in the gauge here that it shuts both off, traction and the stability, and it shuts them off. So you could do donuts, you can do whatever that you want in this car. Now, when we talk about comfort, we've got to talk about these seats, because as we said, these are amazing racing seats. Do accommodate many different body types. I've had many different types of people in the car, and they've all really enjoyed it. No one's complained, aside from it's very small in here, like a Mazda Miata. But I mean, the actual seats themselves are accommodating, and they're comfortable. I've taken long trips on this and never complained. My back doesn't hurt, my rear end doesn't hurt, I'm not uncomfortable. It's wonderful. It really, really is. And part of that is because of the Sachs dampers. Now, these are performance dampers, and how to best describe them is they're almost magical. And what I mean magical is the Mark 7 GTI that I have came out so early. I got it so early in the run that they hadn't, at least in Canada anyway, given the true dynamic as part of the performance package. They didn't give you the dynamic chassis like did about 6 months later after the initial release. So anyway, it just has the normal dampening, and it's excellent on that GTI. It's not too hard and it's not too soft, and you feel great going around corners. This is the same, but way better. And what I mean that is, so many times I've come up to train tracks or speed bumps or something within reason with this car and thought, oh no, this is going to be awful. It's going to rattle my teeth, but it doesn't. It's totally fine. And I'm always shocked every single time. And I'm equally as shocked when I go on the highway on an on-ramp or something like that, where I'm expecting that same level of suppleness like my GTI, and you're not going to have the same level of control when the car leans going around that corner. Yet there is no sacrifice with these Sachs dampers in that way. When they load up going around the corner, they stay so firm. I don't understand how the technology works, but you know what? They do great, and that's all I can say as far as comfort and sportiness. They're amazing. NVH levels, as you can hear, awfully loud in here. However, I like it, and they've done it on purpose. As we said, with those cost-saving measures, that was one reason. But another reason is it does seem like a 90s sports car in here. I've had 90s sports cars back in the day. I've had an Acura Integra. I've had all kinds of stuff. And you know what? This is fun. This is really fun in here. It's very, yes, I know it's not a VTEC engine. It's not the most brilliant sound in the world, but I personally don't mind it as much as other people. And it's great because it seems authentic. It's very raw. It's quite an experience in here. Now, obviously, because it is the year 2020 when this came out, it's still going to be a lot quieter than any of those 90s cars for sure, but compared to the cars today, including the 2022, which I think that they made a bit of a mistake on that car, is they've quieted it up quite a bit. So the NVH levels, I don't have the actual figures for you, but that car seems a lot more like a luxury car in there. It's a lot more quiet. However, they've increased the volume of that engine and piped it in through the stereo or something, I think. And anyway, I personally think it's too loud. And on the manual transmission, which is what most people would buy, and the one I would probably buy, you can't, at least easily anyway, from the factory, you can't tune that out. You can't hit a button and make it quieter. On the automatic version of that 2022, you can. And I haven't driven one of them to know if it's much better. But anyway, it is loud in here, but it's a good loud. It really is. You don't hear a lot of tinny type noises, hence why I said it's not a 1990s car. But on the same note, you've got that engine noise. They do allow some wind noise in here, but again, it's not like a Toyota Supra buffeting or something terrible. It just, yeah, it feels really good. The whole car is communicative. The steering, yes, it's electronic, as we talked about before, like everything nowadays, but I can barely notice. It's closer to a hydraulic than any other one I've driven, 13-to-1, so it's really, really sharp and all that type of stuff. So what we want to do as well is talk about economy, because you're going to be driving this car all the time. Most likely it's going to be a daily driver. So I have to say that it's terrible on gas. Now, when I say terrible, it's, it's not a Trackhawk or some of these crazy vehicles where you get, whatever, 9 miles a gallon or something. I'm getting right now, I'm looking at it right in the dash. You can't see it because I don't have my camera on it, but it's telling me that I'm getting on average about 10.3 liters per 100. I'll convert that on the screen later, but so it's not great, for a 4-cylinder. But again, you know that going in, or at least you will now, that you're going to sacrifice a little bit. It does take premium fuel, but the car runs more efficiently, so I've never really understood that argument anyway. But nonetheless, it's a little bit more at the pump because you're going to have to pay that premium, and it's going to suck back the gas pretty good, and especially heavier the foot that you have. Even when I drive this car fairly easily and sanely, it's still not that much better on gas. I still only average in the city, which is most of my driving, maybe 400 kilometers on a tank of gas. And nowadays, with things well over $1, I'm looking at it right now, $1.40 here, plus, it's easily going to cost you $60, $70 to fill this tiny car up on fuel. Now, the last thing to mention is price. As I said, this car, brand new, when I bought it, was $33,645 MSRP plus all your goodies, Canadian, as they say in the straight pipes, which wasn't bad. One of the factors that I went with the car, like I said, I could afford a Golf R, I could afford those things, but I thought, in an economic climate like this, do I really need to spend essentially, not quite double, but it feels double on that monthly payment sometimes, when this car gave me thrills that those other ones didn't. They gave me more thrills in a straight line for sure, but I just fell in love with this rear-wheel drive car. The nimbleness of it, the lightweight, all of that stuff. And I think that's part of the appeal now, because when we're talking pricing, we said that this car has become relevant again. And as you can see on the screen, there are several examples in my local area in Ontario here that are all selling for around what they were new or more. So it's a little crazy right now because you can't get those 2022s. And as we said, the 2022s are pretty much the exact same price as when they first came out. Now, base to base, you can get a new automatic with eyesight, which they didn't offer before, and get it a couple $1,000s more basically than what this car would have been. So it's a tiny bit more, but I don't think that they're pricing us out of the market by any means. And I do hope to do a review on the 2022, God willing, and you will see that it is a very nice car. Everything is subjective, so it's going to be up to you whether or not you think that it's better looking, or you like the fact that they've increased the engine noise and made the overall car quieter, all that stuff. But I have to say that they've done an excellent job on that car as well, and they've priced it well as well. So let's move on to our final thoughts. Now, to give you my final thoughts, we began this review as always by looking at all the different features of this car and to put it against its original marketing to see how it stacked up. But what we did, we also put it against the 2022 to see how it stacked up against it. And we also went through and gave some of the lessons that we've learned over the last year and a half to give you a better idea if you should buy this 2020 now or never consider and wait for the 2022. Well, to keep neutral, I'd have to say you can't go wrong either way. I personally like the look of the 2022 much better. I love that vent on the side. I love the functional aero. I love that little bone at the bottom to redirect air. I like the more Lexus look on the interior. I really do. But at the end of the day, I think I would still go with a 2017 to a 2020, because that was the refresh of an RS package. Reason being is those Sachs dampers and those Brembo brakes make an incredible difference when it comes to handling and braking, and they really do make this car feel a little bit more special. So I personally think that I'll be waiting for a 2022 RS. Thanks for watching.